Hello and welcome to my no cards build log for Stronghold Kingdoms for days 44 to 50. Now, in the past day, I reached a new rank, and I'm now a
Viscount,
which means I can have up to 5 villages. And the new village that I got is right over here in the parish of York. Now, there are a couple of reasons for me taking this village. As you can see, it's fully built already, and I captured it off of a player who, for all accounts and purposes, looks like an alt account. I mean, okay, this is the player right here. As you can see, he doesn't have any villages left, but his name is K0DIAB34R12. Now, in elite speak, this guy is obviously old school. I mean, he's coming back from the friggin' 90s. But it's very similar to Coda Bear, now wouldn't you say? And, I mean, minus the I and the 12 at the end of it, I mean, that spells Coda Bear. And, well, let's just look here. Well, there's Coda Bear. And he happens to be in House 14. He happens to be an enemy. And then there is this guy who is right here, who's named Kodia Bear in Elite speak. So, I mean, is that a coincidence, or is that player just using multiple accounts? And the best part about it is they really do a great job. I mean, look at this castle. I've seen this happen before. The truly good alt accounters, they know how to build a noob castle in all of their alt accounts. To pull the wool over Firefly's eyes. And nothing gets really any noobier than a castle like this. So it was a walk in the park, thanks to that. And I'm not saying, and I shouldn't publicly accuse any player of being or having alt accounts, but you have to admit it looks kind of fishy when you do that. And the best part about it was this player, who was also in House 14, who recently took over this parish, didn't touch Kodia Bear. Cody Elite Speak Bear. And why would that be? I mean, the village, it was a full village. It was very easy to capture. If I can capture into a full village, or if I can take over a full village, that is always the preferable option for me. In this case, the village is actually quite good, aside from the fact that there is no cathedral and no churches in it. I'm building a cathedral right now. You got all the ale going. You got plenty of apple farms. I can always delete the wheat farms and the dairy farms, pig farms that I don't really have any research done for. But all in all, it saves you a lot of time, and it's a lot more productive than anything that I would have to build up would be. I mean, because it took me roughly a month to build up my first and second villages. The real limitation as to how quickly you can build something, it's really down to the research of architecture. And if you don't have research points put into architecture, it's going to be holding back the development of your villages. So, let's take a look at the research I did. Now, in the military tab, obviously I put an additional point into leadership research so I could take my 5th village, but I also put a point of research into tactics. Now, at the time, I was toying with the idea of using captains to basically harass some of the House 14 smaller players, because they do the same thing to our players, and it can be quite effective, especially with things like catapult volley. And of course, arrow volley is always recommended to research. So I'm not sure I would recommend putting a point into tactics at this point in the game for other people. It was sort of a passing fancy of mine, and it really didn't come to fruition or really amount to anything. Now, in addition to those 2 points, I also put a point into ransacking, and the idea behind this is being able to ransack is a very useful skill, and 1 point will allow you to always be able to ransack one building successfully. You can put additional points into it, but even if you have all 8 points into it, you have it at level 8, it's still possible that in a 8-point ransack, you're only going to destroy one building. So, the 1 is always guaranteed, and that's all that's necessary to complete the quest for ransacking. And I have that quest, so it all plays into it. The only other research I did was in the education tree, and most of it, if not all of it, focuses around monks and the different abilities that monks have. So I finished Pilgrimage. Now, last week I covered that I had put 1 point into Pilgrimage, and I believe I was researching another. This week I've finished Pilgrimage, which means that the monks are much faster than they would be otherwise, and it allows me, or it gives me a greater deal of flexibility in things such as curing disease or even sending supporting monks. Having slow monks is a real bummer, and if at all possible, get your speeds up for monks really in a way before scouts, because I know it's hard to believe sometimes, but there are actually players who don't research the ability to interdict themselves. I mean, it is day 51 already, and just a couple of days ago I heard from a few players who had not researched Eucharist 1. The Eucharist 1, of course, allows you to interdict your own village, regardless of your rank, and it is crucial for any house that's going to be actively involved in war. Now, in addition to the points I put into Pilgrimage, I also invested another 3 research points in Theology to unlock the final 2 branches, the final 2 sub-branches of Theology. Those in particular being Extreme Unction and Confession. Now, the benefits that these technologies now research bring, they allow me to absolve players and also excommunicate players. Now, a player who is excommunicated, if you didn't know, cannot send out monks from that excommunicated village. And for confession with absolution, players who are excommunicated their excommunication time can be reduced by sending absolution. So to stay on top of the game, you need to have these researches available at pretty much the same time when everybody else is researching them, because otherwise you fall behind in that tech race. And like I said, if you get excommed yourself, or a faction member needs you to absolve them from their excom, because the enemy player is probably researching this stuff as well. It's important if you're going to be timing up on players. So that covers the research that I did. As far as quests go, I actually completed a fair few in the past week. We're starting off with Science the Wolves 1. I also completed Intelligence Gathering 5, Wolf Hunt 4, Spread the Word 5, Feasting 2. Now you may notice I don't have any research points into Banqueting, but Feasting just requires you to scout resource or banquet resource stashes off of the map. Gold Horde 4, Flourishing Trade 3, Robber Baron 1, Healing the Sick 2, Villain 1, Intelligence Gathering 6, Wolf Hunt 5, Team Player 3, and Feasting 3. And I'm currently working on Law and Order 3, which requires me to destroy a grand total of 5 bandit camps. Every week, I try to cover some new game concepts, something that I came across in the past week. And to be honest, the thing most paramount in my mind is how important activity really is in this game. I mean, we've sort of had a dilemma or a crisis maybe it was 3 or 4 days ago already, but where House 14 invaded and took over the county of Delaware. Now, this was made possible thanks entirely to an inactive faction member of mine. This was a player who was in our faction, who held a sheriff's seat, who had 4 fully built villages, and just out of the blue, this genius goes inactive. There is no word to faction generals, nothing. We do not even know he is inactive. And, to add insult to injury, this freaking idiot couldn't even put troops on his walls. I mean, there were attacks that went through with 2 hits from the House 14. So when you're in a faction, you are part of a team, and communication is vital within that team. If you are going to need to take time off, if you're going to need to quit the game, please don't screw over the people who you're leaving behind in your faction, who trusted you, who tried to help you personally gain stuff. Don't screw them over by just leaving without a word. If you need to, I understand real life stuff comes up. We all have to take some time away from time to time. And tell your faction members, though. And it doesn't matter if you don't speak English. You can use a translator. And you just have to translate one sentence. Like, I need to be quitting the game. All my armies are off my walls. Take my villages. That's all he had to say. But no, we do not hear a word out of him. So now, House 14 has a strong foothold. Lots of fully built villages with great castles in them. And once again, it is due to a player who didn't have the common courtesy to let us know he was going inactive. And this is not the first time it has happened. In my very parish, there was a player named Watson here. Now, this player was quite active during the first 20 days or so of the world. He even took a village here in DC, and he was eventually raised out, but never once did he tell us when he was leaving the game. And right here is the only village he has left. And apparently left the game without a word, didn't have many troops on the village walls, and of course House 14 finds out about it, caps right in. So it comes down to players who are active and those who aren't. That's the deciding factor on whether a faction can be successful or not. During a war, if your members are not active, they're going to be sitting on interdiction all the time, which basically puts them on the back foot. They're going to be defending the entire time. The attacker, the aggressor, will press their advantage. They continue to take villages from the house, so the house is just slowly losing. And interdiction, all it does is stall the time that it takes that house to lose. Unless you have players who are active and who are out there attacking, your house cannot withstand an attack, cannot participate in a war without losing. So keep that in mind if you are one of those uppity farmer houses who thinks you're going to show the world just how angsty you are because somebody took a flag from your parish or raided 100 gold last night without your permission. Don't do it. You're farmers. You're going to lose. And I can tell you that right now, being a member of a farming house, leading a farming house, I've done all these things in the past. I know how to negotiate with houses that are stronger than me, and there always seems to be a couple of players in your faction who don't like what you do. They think that you should stick up for their inactivity. The farmers in farmer factions, these are players who aren't very active to begin with. So when a fighting house comes along and raids 100,000 of their gold that they left sitting in their parish for no obvious reason, the excuse you always hear is, well, I need that gold to remove the AI castles. BS. How many times do you see farmers actually removing AI castles from their parishes? It is rare in older worlds, and that's what I'm talking about. Here is an older world, not USA 3, but it is very rare in older worlds, and it is just this entitlement from farmers that they expect all this respect that is earned through fighting, not through farming. And they expect to be treated as an active player when a lot of the time they are very inactive. So when it comes to a crescendo and you actually have the farmers in a fighting house, that never turns out well. And lack of communication is also critical to a house's success. As I pointed out, if these players had informed my house or my faction before, because they were all in my faction, not just my house. These were players in my faction. If they had informed my faction general, the officers, we could have dealt with their inactivity, we could have removed their villages, and House 14 wouldn't have nearly the foothold on Delaware that they do right now. So that pretty much covers a minor, something that has been on my chest through the past few days. It has made me quite unhappy because I don't have the research to attack. I don't have the resources to attack, to counter these. So you're just sitting here throughout the day and you're watching people take over inactive faction members because your faction members were so inconsiderate that they just couldn't tell anyone that they weren't going to be online anymore. And, I marked the guy who was the former sheriff of Delaware. He's an enemy now. If that SOB spawns back into the game and he happens to be near me, I'm going to raise him. I mean, there is no way he gets to pull this stunt and expect me to put up with him around here again. He tries to come back and pull it in the same area. Forget that. I mean, he has a past history, and in Stronghold Kingdoms, reputation does matter. If you're going to be a real dog on the team, I'm not going to accept you back, you know. You can't do that. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Comes down to that. Also, another thing, and I realize this video has, once again, rambled on a bit further than it should. I probably play I take 4 hours off every night to sleep. And then throughout the day, I will also take a couple hours to nap or something, and I spend a lot of my time at the computer. So I understand this is not for everybody. And if I was just a plain old farmer, sort of a free-to-play player is usually heavily a farmer. But if I was just another free-to-play player and I maybe spent 2 hours a day at the game, I would have been raised off the map by now. This can be controlled, however. I'm not saying free-to-play players have to be very active compared to players who play cards. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're being invaded in this manner, if you're a carder and you can only play a couple hours a day, you're still going to get heavily owned by the people who are invading. The thing is, you can spring back from that really quickly as compared to a player like me. So it'd be more likely I would be discouraged by this sort of thing. So yeah, I play a lot, and one way to avoid having to play as much is to move into bigger counties. Now, during the first video, I mentioned that it was a bad thing that I ended up in Delaware because I hit randomly place, and Delaware is a very small county, and while you may think that if you jump into a very small county, your odds of being able to control it are higher, the odds that you're going to be targeted by players seeking entrance into a small county like that are they do not compensate for the perceived advantage. So what you want to do is get into as big a county as possible. As a free-to-play player, the bigger the county, the smaller you are, you're going to be off the radar. Take a look at Texas here. This would have been a great county to be in because how many parishes? There are a few dozen. There's like a couple dozen parishes right here in this county. So you get lost. You blend right in. And House 14 is not attacking or targeting many of the players in this county, for example, right below me. So if you're free to play, I would recommend searching for a large county right off the bat. Going for those larger ones, they help you blend in, and hopefully then people will be less likely, enemies I should say, will be less likely to notice your inactivity or to really test your villages as much. So that pretty much covers everything for day 44 to 50. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.